Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin momentarily. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of Courageous Conversations, Michelle Ray.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Ray, the Executive Director of the Walter Cates Foundation. I'm pleased to welcome you to our new virtual mini-series, Courageous Conversations. Each event in this series will feature thought-provoking and action-inspiring talks that are essential for anyone who's driving diversity and inclusion inside and outside of their organization. We'll feature nationally recognized change agents, experts, and DEI leaders, all of whom will provide meaningful perspectives and actionable insights on the important topics of the day. But before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the generous support and steadfast commitment of our sponsors who make events like this, as well as our work throughout the year, possible. First, I would like to recognize our official sponsors, Charter Communications and Comcast NBC Universal. Our benefactors are A&E, Cox Communications, and ESPN. And our contributors are AMC Networks, CommScope, Discovery Communications, Univision, Viacom CBS, and Warner Media, along with the support of many advocates, friends, and partners. It is their generous support that allows us to do the work that we do. So today's exciting program is the result of a very proud partnership with Angela Northington and the Entertainment Speakers Bureau, which is the premier digital speakers platform that's designed for experienced and cutting-edge speakers who sit at the intersection of technology, media, and entertainment. And we're very thrilled to have been working with her over these past few days. So today marks the second episode in our Courageous Conversations series. We'll be discussing the groundbreaking partnership between Viacom's CBS Studios and the NAACP. The landscape of diversity and accountability in Hollywood is evolving, and the time is now really for meaningful change, and that this landmark effort by media and civil rights leaders alike is an important path forward. We'll be hearing from an all-star lineup of speakers who are integral to the success of this new collaboration. And leading the exciting conversation today is Daryl Cuba. Daryl is a prolific journalist, oral historian, and current fellow at the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School and the Ivy League's first Wikipedia fellow. With a unique background that spans media, politics, and business, Daryl's work has spanned several disciplines, including theater, film, and television, marketing, communications, and emerging technologies. Daryl actually holds an MA in oral history from Columbia University, where he founded the movement hashtag hacking racism, it's a mouthful, as well as hashtag mapping freedom project. As an alumnus of the New York Times, Vice, Tribeca Enterprises, and Fox Home Entertainment, Daryl has written extensively on racism and bias, including his 2015 Vice feature that was entitled The Loud Fight Against Silicon Valley's Quiet Racism, How Tech Became a Civil Rights Battleground. So Daryl is also known as a social innovator and disruptor, and he works to dismantle and eliminate systemic institutional inequity across the globe. We're very, very fortunate to have Daryl here today. So before we begin, and as we bring Daryl on, I'd like to encourage you to be a part of today's conversation. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the discussion by simply using the Q&A tab in your Zoom window. We will do our very best to get to your questions. So without further ado, let's bring Daryl on to set the stage to kick off today's conversation. And I'd like to welcome Daryl.
Thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. And sure, as a journalist, historian, and social entrepreneur, I am thrilled to be here today with NAACP President and CEO, Derek Johnson, power attorney and rainmaker, Daryl Miller, and veteran executive, Sheila Ducksworth, to have a conversation on brokering real change, a discussion on the landmark CBS NAACP partnership, a part of the Walter Cates Courageous Conversations virtual series. Now, Courageous Conversation is such a relevant title because what we are talking about today no doubt took courageous conversations to achieve, and will undoubtedly require many more from other industry leaders and power brokers in order to achieve more broadly across the entire media sector. Let me begin by addressing the important role the NAACP has had in shaping the images of people of color portrayed on screen and film and television for well over a century. The NAACP, which was founded in 1909 to secure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights in order to eliminate race-based discrimination, has been fighting negative images on screen dating back to 1915, when the film Birth of a Nation was released and the NAACP called for a full boycott. In 1951, when the radio show Amos and Andy was adapted to television, the NAACP mounted a formal protest almost as soon as the television version began, culminating in the show's cancellation. Then, in 1967, the NAACP launched the Image Awards to celebrate the outstanding achievements and performances of people of color in the arts, as well as individuals and groups who promote social justice through their creative endeavors. Coming full circle, this new landmark multi-year partnership with CBS puts the NAACP in a position of power in Hollywood, with the stated goal of developing diverse and inclusive content, as well introducing a diverse range of voices. So here to talk about this incredible new opportunity are Derek Johnson, a lawyer and humanitarian, and the 19th president and CEO of the NAACP. He previously served as president of its Mississippi state chapter and vice chairman of its board of directors. Johnson is the founder of the Mississippi nonprofit group One Voice Incorporated, which aims to improve quality of life for African Americans through public engagement. He is also an annual guest lecturer at the Harvard Law School, lending his expertise on social movements and beyond. Next, we have Daryl Miller, founding chair of the Entertainment and Sports Department at the national law firm of Fox Rothschild LLP, and one of the world's leading entertainment attorneys working in film, television, theater, and digital media. He is the author of the NAACP Image Award nominated book, The 16th Minute of Fame, an insider's guide for maintaining success beyond 15 minutes of fame. He has been recognized as one of the top 40 dealmakers in Variety Magazine's Dealmakers Impact Report for 7 consecutive years. And completing our panel is the newly elected president of the CBS NAACP Content Venture, Sheila Ducksworth. Sheila is an entertainment veteran who most recently spent 3 years as head of scripted television and production for Will Packer and Will Packer Media, had 2 stints at Emmett's Entertainment, and served as an executive in current programming at UPN earlier in her career, overseeing all new and returning dramas for the network. Welcome, esteemed panelists, to Courageous Conversations. And to our audience, again, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll be coming back to those questions at the end of this conversation. So now I'd like to start off with a question to you, President Johnson.
There we go.
Welcome. So a question several people have asked me prior to today's event is, how does the CBS NAACP deal factor into the overall mission of the NAACP?
It is central to our mission. As you stated earlier, the NAACP, 111 years old, our first major campaign was an anti-lynching campaign to prevent the lynching of individuals across the country. But the second major campaign we took on was the release of the historic film, Birth of a Nation, because we understood then, as we understand now, how we are seen on the screen is how we are treated in the streets, how we are treated in public policy, and our advocacy cannot be just limited to a siloed approach. It must be a cultural approach where things impact all of our lives. The power of media, the power of the motion picture, the power of the profession of storytelling is something that we must all pay special attention to, because it can define the narrative of a people for generations to come.
Wow, and to that point, you've sort of gone outside of just Hollywood and media, because you recently had a meeting with President-elect Biden, where you and other leaders asked this incumbent administration to create a new position, a national advisor for racial justice and equity. So how could or would this position impact the course and success of the CBS NAACP deal specifically, and Blacks in media in general?
Well, the problem with this nation, we have rested on this notion that white supremacy was okay. And that's something that we must all push against. Race is a social construct. Many individuals who are considered white today were not considered white in 1930 or 1920. And because it is such a construct, if we don't break this caste system, we will forever be fighting against something that we should have addressed centuries ago. W.E.B. Du Bois is one of the founders of the NAACP, and he stated that race will be the question of the 21st century. We are in 2020, and we're still dealing with that question. And as we met with the president-elect, he announced that a priority of his administration will be to address racial equity. You cannot do that in speeches. You cannot do that in words alone. You must create a portfolio that someone is responsible for to ensure that racial equity is across the administration in every cabinet, and it must be a position that reports directly to the president, so that everyone that's a part of this administration know that it is a true priority and we can advance beyond the question of race.
And to that point, I'd like to bring in Daryl Miller and ask you both about the origins of this deal. Because in the summer of social unrest and protests, the two of you co-authored a powerful Variety op-ed titled "Hollywood Must Not Settle for the Comfortable Response to Fight Systemic Racism." And you outlined 4 concrete steps entertainment companies should take to ensure meaningful change and respect their Black and Brown consumers. Those steps were: 1, appoint Black people to board seats proportionate to the number of Black people reflected in their audiences, subscribers, or consumer base. 2, to promote and hire Black people to fill more C-suite and senior creative executive positions. 3, set concrete goals and measurable objectives to guarantee distribution of programming that shows people of color in non-stereotypical roles and beyond the token cast member. And 4, most importantly, gauge success by measurable results, as entertainment companies do in every other operational aspect of their business. So I guess first up is, how was the op-ed a catalyst for discussion in industry boardrooms from broadcast and cable and beyond? And did it ultimately impact on this deal?
me, I think yes, to the extent we were probably early into the discussion as far as writing op-eds and columns in Hollywood. There was a lot going on in the world. And, you know, for us, Derek and I, we're kind of on this mission. I've been fortunate to kind of work with Derek and the NAACP for the last 2 or 3 years. And we were already kind of in this dialogue and trying to figure out ways to make things happen. So when the situation occurred and the unrest occurred, we were already kind of 2 steps ahead. And I think the article really came when we, you know, just collaborated on, you know, how can we give some concrete, very specific examples that people can stop saying, I don't know what to do. Or more importantly, if you recall, Derek, you know, we had this phrase of being adverse against the comfortable response, the comfortable give, the comfortable, you know, easy thing to do when there's unrest and you feel like you want to show how passionate you are, but you may not necessarily want to do the thing that's lasting and sustainable to actually change the result. And so you saw a lot of money flood in. You saw a lot of I'm sorries. You saw a lot of things that we see every time these situations come up. And Derek and I sat back and said, you know, this moment feels too different to allow those same things to kind of go without kind of challenging a few more people to think differently, embrace change, and try to, you know, and try to go for a much bigger swing this time if we expect to get real different results this time.
No, absolutely. Diversity is a business imperative. We cannot get away from the fact that this country and this globe is much more multicultural than the depictions that we see coming out of Hollywood. I've been in this position now for 3 years. And one of the things that I charged the association that we had to do was to look forward towards a proactive future as opposed to backwards towards our legacy. And in doing so, begin to look at all of our functions. Our Hollywood office have existed for over 20 years now. The Image Awards is going on 52 years old. And the industry have transitioned to the place that a linear show that's shown once a night is a depleting proposition. And so when Daryl came on board, having a critical thought partner, we began to explore questions around how do we diversify what the NAACP is positioning to do as we push for diversity in the industry as a whole. And we went so far as we traveled over to Ghana to see what can we do on the continent? How can we expand our brand identity? How can we make the case that diversity is a business imperative? But when George Floyd happened, it also forced many companies to think differently. And so for us, we said, you know, we want to go beyond the check because the check is temporary. It's great headlines. We want to have an impact. And we talked to many studios and platforms, but it was CBS that actually answered the call. And for that, now we are happy to bring on the expertise of Sheila Ducksworth to prove that it is, in fact, a business imperative. And as a social justice organization, we have stories to tell.
Wow. And to that point, so I'd like to direct the next question to all 3 of you, President Johnson, Daryl, and Sheila. Given that CBS has answered this call, which was so effectively outlined in your op-ed, is there an overall sense that this new deal addresses all 4 of these important pillars? I'd love to hear from all 3 of you.
Well, I'll jump in first. I don't know. I think it's kind of early to see if the pillars have really been resolved, because one is really about the measurable results, you know, and those results are going to be, I think, after a period of time in the process. We're still, I think, in the middle of that process, particularly because the pandemic shut our business down forever. So we've kind of all stopped and froze for a long time. But remember, the biggest result was about, you know, having quantifiable, identifiable, you know, things that we can point to say we are different. Now, I think the very fact that there have been a number of people of color in the C-suite, that is you've seen a lot of shifts in the last 60, 90 days with significant people moving into significant, seats. Again, I think that was perhaps some in motion as this happened. I think some were accelerated after George Floyd, and that is, I think, a reflection of something we pointed out in our article. But, having the board makeup reflect the percentage of people of color of their consumers that, I still think there's a ways to go there in trying to get there. Having the actual bottom line executives be held accountable based on their actual numbers of diversity and the content that they're putting out there, I think there has a ways to go. And we have other organizations that are doing reports annually that kind of look at the trends and look at the numbers of representation in front of and behind the camera. And I think the next time those reports come around, they're annual, we will see, did we move the needle more than we have in the previous years? And as we know, in the previous years, those needles have not moved very far. So I think there's a little time for me before we know if we've hit every one of those pillars. But the fact that we've even started on one or two, for me, is a small victory because we've begun to see change.
I would agree with that, that it will take a little bit of time for us to see that those pillars are indeed met, but it's a really auspicious beginning, I have to say. The partnership has been up now for a month. We're a month running, and it has been, I have to say, just phenomenal. Being at a place like CBS and the support and the resources that have been extended to actually meet these things where we can see concrete differences in programming that existed in the past to where we're going now. I think those are vigorously being met. I think that I am very much looking forward to, as I said, this is just the beginning and we're just starting to dive in, but the support could not be, it's an understatement to say that it's great. It's really wonderful. And when you look at the people like Derek and Daryl who made this whole venture possible, and George Cheeks, who said, I want to be in on this. I want to make a difference. I want to see something different here at CBS. It's been remarkable, I have to say, and all across, all the aspects and the different departments that we've been dealing with. It's been great. So I really do look forward to, between everybody doing their share, and that's all of us here, Derek and Daryl and George and all the people at CBS and all the buyers that are out there that we intend to engage. I think that we will see a huge difference in programming in a short time to come.
Anything to add, President Johnson?
I think they both hit it. It's early, but it's exciting. And because it is exciting, we're going to do all we can to make it a success. There are so many stories that have yet to be told. There are so many creatives who have yet to have the right plug-in to share their art with the globe. And we recognize that this is not about the 50 states. Content now goes global. And it goes global in ways in which we will not be able to measure immediately, but over time, as many of us travel abroad, people are looking for content that come from the African American experience, and that experience is rich, is diverse, is dynamic, and it's something that's based in comedy and horrors. It's all of the beautiful, rich stories that many of us grew up listening to our families tell, and what a wonderful opportunity to have a platform to begin to tell those stories.
And I'll just add, while again I'm happy to share in helping to make this thing happen, but I'll tell you, Derek and I would have been the canaries in the coal mine if there was not a bunch of people on the other side of the table really, really embracing this idea. And so it cannot go without being stated enough that, from the network at CBS, the studio at CBS, and, George Cheeks himself as the new president and CEO, just kind of all wrapping their arms around this kind of wild, big swing idea really, really is making this happen. So while, Derek and I have thought like this for a while, and, and others had opportunities, as Derek said, but it really took, and I was most impressed that we were met, with people, vertically throughout this system that were, 100% invested in trying something different. That to me felt like a new level of change.
Well, congrats to all of you, and George Cheeks, and of course, you, Sheila, as the executive of this new venture. And it seems, that you guys are well on your way. So I want to also follow up with your point, Daryl, so you're the architect of this deal. So how did you approach this from such a structural standpoint? given that a partnership of this complexity, as you've mentioned, doesn't have a lot of precedence in this industry?
For me, it was, I've built a practice of, I came to Hollywood, not with the NAACP, but with the mindset of kind of getting into the business side and kind of changing the pipeline through which all of these images flow that affect my community. And so when I aligned with the NAACP to have the power to open the doors to begin a certain dialogue, I was not shy about just thinking differently and talking in a way that I have learned after all these years in practicing would be possible. And why is it possible? Because what I've learned, the secret of Hollywood is anything's possible if you're in the right room with the people that have the capacity to make those things happen. And so we opened the door, or Derek and the association opened the door. And just in my experience and understanding how deals have been navigated, relationships have been made, new ventures have been launched, I brought all of that to the table and just said, look, let's think creatively. And, just more concretely, the first thing I did, and if you recall this, Derek, when everyone else, we did this dog and pony show around town, and most thought we were crazy. Most thought we were ready to talk about social justice and diversity numbers. But when we went in and talked about deals and finding a way to do what they do best, but in a way that, would just simply collaborate with the association, no one could get it. But I remember one meeting when lights started to go on where Derek and I said, if you're really having a tough time kind of grasping the concept of what we're talking about, you only need to look at what Netflix has done with the Obamas. If you recall, when the Obamas launched and got a big deal at Netflix talking about programming, everyone said they don't create programming, but it was this national headline news cycle about the Obamas having a deal at Netflix. And so it really was, I think, in those meetings where Derek and I began to kind of say, look, that's really about a branded deal and given a sensibility to the content more than it is just trying to say we are writers and directors like individuals in Hollywood. And people seem to get it after that. So I used the skill of access, the ability to kind of make the analogy that this town often lives on, and then just really began to kind of articulate a vision that painted the picture that I think people could see.
We have to start from the place that people constructed boxes that we simply don't fit in. And if we recognize that, then we say, okay, what are the ingredients for us to construct a box where we can be included? One is relationships, two is critical thought, three is as an element of risk taking, and four, not to be allergic with the word no. People are going to tell you no, so what? I've heard it all my life. It's a wonderful word. It's spelled with 2 letters, but it's never killed anyone. And so it was our opportunity to take those ingredients and think differently to create a box that best represented our needs, our interests. The NAACP, we are a conglomerate. We're not a single force organization. We have 2 C3s, 2 C4s. We're NGO to the United Nations. We have a for-profit arm. We have a lobby arm. We have an entertainment division. That's the makeup of who we are. It's my job to breathe life into all of those entities. And I can only breathe life into those entities if I build relationships with people like Daryl, who have the experience and the insight, and we become critical thinking partners in ways in which we construct new boxes. Because as the industry begins to transform itself, we must also do the same thing and be as creative as possible. And if the industry reject us, then our next step was, how do we build our own taco truck and then start driving it that way? That's really important. We've seen it in the past and we're going to see it in the future, but fortunately in the present, we have a new vehicle that we can drive.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for sort of giving us a history of how much teamwork and complexity that this systemic and structural partnership has taken on. And congrats to you, Sheila, for sort of like standing on top of the ceiling. You didn't have to break a ceiling with this, or maybe you did. But I do want to. So, Sheila, you've had such an illustrious and storied career as a development executive and producer. So tell me more about how this new partnership attracted you as an executive, and how is the responsibility of this new role different from your previous posts?
Well, I have to say that I've been really working in this lane for a very long time. So I've been in Los Angeles now for about 25 years, and I started off my first show that I actually received my first producing credits from was Soul Food. And so that was a great groundbreaking show that first debuted in 2000. So hard to believe that that was 20 years ago, but it was. And so that really, I won't say that that started my journey, because the journey for that started well before then, but it was really kind of with the level and the magnitude that the show had and resonate and how it resonated with viewers, it really did grab hold and really solidified that this was what I intended to and wanted to do. So I've been in the lane of really looking to develop shows that highlighted our experiences and told our stories for a long time. So it was a no-brainer almost. It was, you know, the attraction was immediate. You know, when I first got the tap on the shoulder to say, would you be interested? I said, okay, let me think about that. Let me see. And let's hear some more about what you're doing. And I have to say what Derek and Daryl put together and what was communicated to me and the enthusiasm and support behind it from the network were real attention grabbers. So it really wasn't a hard thing to decide that this was what I wanted to do. And true to, you know, just I think our history, there have been people that just paved the way to make things happen. And I really look at this as one of those things, this vehicle that Derek was just talking about. And I love that Tonka truck analogy, but it really is, it's, you know, we've been a people that, you know, have had, you know, a lot of adversity, but I have to say with that, a lot of creativity has had to come from that, of making things happen and making things work. And you know, the ability to actually come in at this point. And I tell them all the time that the hard work was done with what they did. And I'm really, really honored and really privileged to just kind of carry it on from here. So it's, you know, it is the beginning of the process for me, but certainly not the beginning of the process for CBS, the people within CBS, for the NAACP, for Daryl. It's, you know, they've been doing the work. And so I'm grateful that this vehicle does exist so that we can, you know, put it in motion and drive it.
Thanks so much, Sheila. And before I follow up to that, to your answer, I do want to remind the audience that you can submit your questions through the Q&A tab in your Zoom window, and we'll be able to get to them later in the program. So to that point, Sheila, what do you anticipate the development slate will, the development slate will look like? Like, what types of projects will you be looking at? Are there specific talent partnerships you're exploring? How can content creators access this new opportunity?
As I said, it's beyond exciting, primarily because there are really no limits to what we will be able to do. We'll be selling every format. So it'll be hour-longs and half hours, movies, limited series, documentaries, animation, unscripted. We're doing absolutely everything. And we're going everywhere with it. Certainly there's, you know, all the internal platforms within CBS that are available and at hand, including obviously the CBS, the broadcast network, but we are going everywhere. We're going to be going to all the streamers, so Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Apple and all of them. We're going to be going to all of the cable platforms, as well as all of the broadcasters. So there's, you know, just immense opportunity when you look at really just even what's kind of in the family. It's such a deep well with All Access, soon to be Paramount Plus and Showtime, and, you know, all of the CBS Viacom platforms, as I mentioned, like Comedy Central and MTV and Smithsonian, and you name it. There are so many that are already in the family, but we're going to have a very extensive reach, and that's really, really exciting.
Wow, thank you.
So if you think you know what it is, you won't. You know, that's the one thing I want to re-emphasize. You know, whether it is horror, comedy, drama, we really, you know, we're not finished taking big swings. We're not finished challenging people's perceptions and stereotypes. We really want this to breathe within the community and to be really a pod or a company from which all kinds of ideas, all kinds of images, all kinds of stories, many of which we have probably yet to see, we want those to be told and have a platform. So, we're not finished taking swings, and we have to bring in someone as brilliant and as talented as a Sheila to actually lead it. And that's another example for me as to why this made sense, right? It wasn't, again, saying, Derek, now we're going to put you in Hollywood, set you on CBS, and tell you to start deciding about writers. It was really, we can actually build a team of capable, talented, people who have long track records already doing it within the system, and actually just do it with a different twist and bring a level of authenticity. And by the way, bring an audience that comes with the largest, oldest African-American, organization of social justice in America, or the world, if that matters. So it's a business proposition, and, it works. Often if you don't find the audience that really is willing to be open and to explore it and to make sense of it, it doesn't go anywhere. But we did, and we are doing it. And I don't want anyone to think that they can predict what we're going to do next, because as Sheila just said, our mission, our first mission, is to make sure we do things that people are not expecting.
Yeah, and that's really funny. When we were first just talking about the position and the opportunity, I was talking with you, Daryl, and with you, Derek, and a few other people that were on the Zoom, and I did ask the question. I said, so what kind of things would you foresee us doing? Is it going to be, some of the things that are important to the organization in terms of historical content? And Derek said, well, yes, there'll be some of that. However, what I really want to see is a great science fiction project. He said, people won't be expecting that from us. And it's so true. We are in the midst of looking for a really great science fiction project. And we actually think that we're closing in on something really notable and wonderful. But I have to say that, just to kind of piggyback on what Daryl said, and what we've all talked about, and Derek, is that we want to just do a little bit of everything. The most important thing is that we want to show people of color in positions that they actually are already in. We were talking about things like, kind of one of my favorite shows, going back to, I guess, back in the early 2000s again, was 24. It was just one of my favorite shows for so many reasons. But none, least of which was, of course, there was a Black president before there was a Black president. And what I loved about that is that it normalized that it really wasn't about the fact that it was a Black president. He just was the president. And then I look at, the other lead character in that, the Jack Bauer of it all. And, I say there are Black spies that are out there, and we haven't really seen them, but they are out there. And so, when I look at shows like, Jack Ryan, or any of these shows that feature, these big, larger than life heroes, there's no reason why we can't have our heroes as well, especially given the fact that they exist, but we just haven't seen them. So we're going to be doing things that, touch on action and mystery, and horror, like Daryl said, and science fiction. And we are going to be telling, some important historical stories, but I really want to tell them in a different way, where they're not just, say, 2-hour kind of cradle to grave, this is what happened, and then, this was the effect. I want to tell them in a way that, especially looking at the landscape of, media and TV as we know it, there's so many ways to tell a story. So, maybe it's a limited series, maybe it's just, just multiple installments, but something that kind of like wraps around an important event, and tells it in a very creative way. So yeah, we're doing a lot of things. I neglected to mention, obviously, half hour, a lot of funny stuff, a lot of funny ideas that we're working on. And we're doing that obviously through the studio, working with David Staff and Kate Adler, who heads the comedy department. And I neglected to say also Brian Seabury, who heads the drama department. It's really a dream, because when we get together, all of us together, there's, it feels like there's nothing that we can't do. So it's exciting. And I will say, as I say, when we all come together and we get together quite often, weekly, to discuss them. I have rounded out the team, so I'm very excited that it's not just me in this. It's great when you can bring on people who really, kind of raise the level. And I've got 2 people now on the team who are absolutely incredible. Courtney Miller is our new creative executive. She came over from HBO in New York, and she was with multicultural marketing. And she is absolutely incredible. And I have to say, my assistant is even in that same league. She just got her law degree at Pepperdine, and she just took the bar 2 weeks ago. And so now is really looking to, dive in, and they both have really rolled up their sleeves in this short period of time to really weigh in and give shape to a lot of what we're looking to do. So it's, at this point, it is a force of 3 within the company, and it's going to be fantastic, I have to say.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I look forward, and I'm sure everyone else here does, to all of these different types of shows and content where they might appear. So turning now to accountability, as you mentioned, this is open to all. Who can best speak to the unique metrics built into the overall structures of this deal, from both a corporate responsibility standpoint and also a creative standpoint?
I'll jump in from the corporate responsibility. I think the accountability for me is measured by the investment we have from the entertainment group president and CEO, from the president of the studio, and even the president of the network. I mean, from that standpoint, we are not dealing just with people who have to report to the top. We're dealing with the top, and so from that point, we're having direct dialogue with the decision makers, and that's often the big debate you hear in Hollywood. You're talking to the people that can actually make decisions. So to me, I think we have first-class accountability, and I feel very good about the dialogue, and the people with whom we're dialoguing, because we're not talking to people who then have to turn around and go convince someone else based on their conversations with us. Creatively, to me, the barometer is someone like Sheila. To me, the first big test of this concept was, would we even attract someone that was serious enough to come, leave an existing career, and bet on this dream? And to me, that's going to be our measure. And to hear how much support she has within the CBS system and the structure, and how her relationships of the past are already servicing her on this particular moment and will in the future. I think creatively, again, we are at the top of the game, which is all you can ask for when you start the game, right? In inning 1. And so we've got the best support, I think, from the infrastructure and the best support creatively. And we are poised to, have a really big game and hit some grand slams and some home runs, and to just do what we do. Now, again, I was in by saying this. I don't think what we're really trying to do, if you really strip it away, is that magical, right? It's just the magical part of it is just who's sitting in the room and the parties around the table. We're talking fundamentally about doing what Hollywood does every day. We're simply saying, rather than filling it with slots without us, put a couple of us in the slots. So we're not changing the game as much as we're changing the way in which the game is played and bringing more parties to the table, which is exciting for me as well, which I think, we're in business with people who sell shows every day. We're people in business who exhibit content around the world every day. And we're not asking for that to be changed one bit, other than to find content that looks a little more like people, of color, and still be commercially viable, funny, interesting, exciting, and something that they can count on and ultimately help them meet their bottom line as well. So from that standpoint, I think we're playing, right into the world in which we have placed ourselves. The problem is we just have never been able to kind of place ourselves at this level of the table in this world.
And be clear, this is still a business. This is identifying content that make business sense. Our goal is to make sure we're not pigeonholing our community into stereotypical roles or stereotypical ways in which we engage. This is about making sure people are in front of the camera, behind the camera, writing the stories. Every year, the NAACP, we receive tons of content through our Image Awards literary competition. And some of that content is rich and is vibrant. Is people telling stories who are futurist, is historical in nature, is comedy, is children books. But it oftentimes stops there. That's just one of many creative outlets that we can tap into to allow some of the most creative in our community to have a platform to expand beyond just the written book, like so many other authors would do. And people will criticize, say, well, you're the NAACP, how you going to come out the gate with a comedy? Guess what? We're funny. That's how. And it's okay.
Right.
Right? Well, you're the NAACP. You're talking about futuristic stuff, and we got problems here. You should be talking. That might be true, but this is about making sure we can tell stories and narrative from our vantage point. This is not about strictly the social justice mission. This is a business, and we're going to infuse it with our mission. And our mission is to make sure that as we reflect ourselves on the screen, it is a part of the dynamic and the diversity that we represent.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that it's really important for us as a community, Black people, African Americans, Indigenous people of color, to see themselves on the screen. When you look at it, African Americans over-index when it comes to watching television. And it does make just good business sense when you have people, and I'll also throw in, that we African Americans also gravitate toward storylines and characters that look like us. And so when you have those kinds of things in play, it really does just make good business sense to do more of that. You'll have more viewers, more opportunity to put other things in front of, viewers and audience. So it really makes, I think, just good business sense to look to expand and be diverse and actually be reflective of more of who's watching and the population itself.
Wow. Thanks so much, guys. And I could sit here all day and sit at your feet and ask all the questions, but I'm getting the signal that we're already over time. So I do want to thank you all for such an informative discussion today. There are many questions that people have asked, so we need to hurry up and get to them. But again, thank you so much for engaging us in this lively discussion. And we'll now start our Q&A and take some questions from the audience. Okay, so our first question is for Sheila from Angela Harvey. Sheila, can you describe how you envision the creative process for the shows developed within the program? And will your team be able to stay connected with this project through to the current side if they are picked up to series?
So the way that I've always functioned, the way that I intend to function is once we go through our development process. So for instance, and for those who may not be aware of kind of a cursory way of the way that it works, we have a project that comes in, whether it's internally generated or it's a submission that someone sends to us that we think is viable, could make a great show. And we and the studio put together, our thoughts and shape it, and of course, bring in a writer for it who has the vision for it. And if one is not already attached, and then we go pitch it, we sell it, we develop it, hopefully we get an order where it ends up on the air, and then we get to the current process. So to answer that question, yes, once it gets to current, that's something that we've always done. We'll always read the scripts and give notes and watch the dailies if there are dailies, and all of that. Whatever it takes, putting together casting or casting thoughts, all of that is what we would continue to do to keep the show on the air, and I should say help keep it on the air, and make it something that feels fresh and current and what audiences want to see.
Okay, so the next question is to the whole panel and anonymous, but this deal is an exciting endeavor, and I hope the network ratings will see a boost from Black audiences. Are you working with Nielsen to assure any audience gains are reflected in the demographic data? this?
Well, let us get something on air first, and then we can take the next step. We're early in the process, but I am sure with Sheila, Daryl, and others' knowledge of how the process works, we're going to be working with all relevant parties, so the outcomes can truly reflect the intended goals.
Right. And as we start, we really are, again, we are trying to be focused initially on the relationship, the environment, getting the good content in place, getting it on the air. And then I think more things will flow from that, but we're not trying to take on every aspect of the process and, at this particular point. And so the ratings conversations haven't really, taken place. Just to answer the question directly, no, not at this stage, because we really are trying to put all of our energy right now into getting this concept off the ground with good content, good shows, getting them sold, right? Sheila mentioned earlier, the biggest task, we can dream all day long, but until people start buying our content and getting that content out, and to me, which is the real measure of success, we are not there yet. So we're excited about, for me, being in the first inning of the game, but we've got a few more innings to go, and we're not going to try to accomplish everything all at once, but we're hopefully doing it really well, one step at a time.
That's fair. So the next question is from Misty Lynch. Is it necessary, or should we just have better numbers, and measurements that show how much money is being left on the table by not featuring diverse cast and crew?
There are so many things to quantify, but I don't know that, I think that the most important thing is just to get in there and make a change. And change starts with, people opening their minds to, wanting diverse projects and diverse stories and series and all of that. What I am looking to do and what we are collectively doing is we are looking to populate, our series and our content with people of color, talented people who haven't had an opportunity to do what they do best. So there's a heavy concentration on African-American writers and writers of color, or working with, really it's all kinds of writers with a primary focus on writers of color, whether that's, kind of a team which may have different backgrounds, writers with different backgrounds on them. But we are really looking to populate our series with people in front of the camera and behind the camera as people who are viable and have great stories to tell and are at the forefront of everything that we do.
Okay. So the next question is from Bella Cruz, a writer, director, actress based in LA. I've been optioned, she says. However, it is still incredibly difficult for me to get in the room on any front. It seems the movement has created more opportunities for those already in the system who are currently working. How can we benefit from this wave of inclusion if we can't even get in the door?
So for us, that's not the case, that people can't get through the door just because they don't have a name that people recognize. As a result of the announcement with, or the multiple announcements that have been made regarding the venture, plenty of people have reached out. And the only caveat is that if they're looking to submit something, it needs to come from a representative. So a lawyer, a manager, an agent, and those really are not so difficult to find, especially if they are not in the system with a manager and an agent. Most everybody knows an attorney that may be able to help them out. So we get submissions from everybody and we take submissions from everybody. So Bella, you should look us up and you should reach out to us. Our number, and I'm happy to give you our number, is 818-655-5047. Feel free to give a call if you'd like any more information from us, or reach out by email. You can reach my assistant, victoria.crawford@cbs.com, and she'll be able to guide you in the best direction. But the door is open for absolutely everybody, as it should be.
Well, thank you for that. And unfortunately, we're out of time. So thank you guys. And I just want to take a moment to thank our distinguished panelists for the great discussion today, our amazing audience for being here with us. And now I'd like to turn it back over to the Executive Director of the Walter Cates Foundation, Michelle Ray.
Thank you so much, Daryl. And I hope all of you will join me in thanking all of our panelists today, including our moderator, Daryl Cuba, President Derek Johnson, thank you, sir, Daryl D. Miller, Esquire, and of course, diva extraordinaire, development exec, and award-winning producer, Sheila Ducksworth. All of you, we're so grateful that you've taken this lead and that you have the courage to really push through for real change and for being role models to all of us. So we hope that this will inspire others for similar partnerships. So if nothing else today, that's what we're hoping for. With respect to our future episodes of Courageous Conversations, we're going to cover topics such as how strong women lead, how diversity drives innovation. But until then, we want to hear from you. So join our committee by subscribing to the Walter Cates Foundation, and hopefully you'll sign up for our emails and you can hear about what we're going to be doing next. I'd like to thank all of you who've joined us today for this conversation. And thanks again to our many sponsors for their continued support of the foundation. And for those of you with backstage passes, please do not go anywhere. I do want to end though with a thought and of course a call to action. So while words may inspire, I think only action is going to create real change. So it's incumbent upon all of us to be brokers of change. And I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday season, and we hope to see you all in the new year.